So the VCV Spectra is a sort of a combination between a filter bank and a spectral processor, which basically means that the incoming signal gets split into different frequency bands. We then have the possibility to process the different bands, and then the signal is put back together. So there are many ways we can use Spectra. Already I will mention the PEQ modules from Bog Audio. They are available for free, and even though they're not really the same module as Spectra, they offer a window into this world of filter banks, and you can see if you like the idea behind them, and if you want more, you can get Spectra. So let's start with the most obvious vocoding. Basically the levels of the different bands of one signal are controlled by the amplitude of another signal, and something I like doing is using vocoders with drums. So here I have a drum groove. Let me just reset everything. I have here the gate sequencer triggering deep from Hora. This is our bass drum. Hi-hats also from Hora, and the snare from Autodafé. And I'm also mixing the drums, and they are going to the auxiliary input of Spectra. And I have the wave oscillator from Blamsoft going to the odd and even inputs. So basically the wave oscillator will be split into the different bands and then put back together, so I can raise the levels of both the odd and even with this slider here. And now we can use the amplitude envelope of the different bands of the drums to affect the amplitude of the bands of this voice. So basically we have this control here which says A to OE, so auxiliary to the odd and to the even inputs. And now the drums are controlling the amplitude of the different bands of this voice. I can also mute the drums maybe. And now we can control the decay of the different bands. Here we have the envelope decay, so I can control the decay of the odd bands, so 1, 3, 5, 6, 7 and so on, sorry. Or just the even 2, 4, 6, 8, or both. So here I have sample and hold we can use to modulate the decay of both odds and evens. Let's bring back the drums. We can also change the decay per band. So here we have the D, which stands for decay, and now we can change the decay for each band. So let's say for the lower frequencies, the lower bands, and you can see the frequencies here, we can change it to be a bit shorter. For the higher bands, maybe a bit longer. We can also change the levels. Here we have stands for L stands for level. So again, we can do something like this. Shape the sound even more. Let's send a copy of this to a delay. I have here Chronoblob 2. So let's send a copy of this voice from the odd and even outputs. Now we get some delay on those frequencies. So So again, the voice is moving together with the drums. If I mute, for example, the bass drum, and I'm muting it just from going to Spectra, not from the main mixer. Bring it back. Right, so I can control the sound even more. Here I have a sequence. I have the Sec3 sequencing the VCO1 from VCV. Just going to a filter and a VCA, nothing special, with some delay here. Now we can also use Spectra as a unique filter. So here I have a sequence going with Orca's Heart from Scanner Darkly. It's sequencing 2 FM operators. Let me unmute this. Now this is going to Spectra, but I first send it to Chronoblob and to Plateau before it goes to Spectra. So Spectra has a bit more signal to process. Maybe the results will be more interesting. So first of all, we can change, again, the levels of the odd bands with this control here, or just the even bands. And as we've seen before, we can change the levels of the individual bands. So I can do something like this, for example, take the lows a bit down, then take both a bit up. Something like this. And then here in this section we have the master filter, so I can change the frequency of the filter. I can change, let's go back to the visual mode, I can change the width of the filter. Let's take it all the way down, and the slope will be, if for example now the filter is here, the frequency of the filter is here, the slope will be how much it will attenuate in either side. So if I take it also all the way down, we have practically 1 or 2 bands. And you can see that I can sweep through those bands, so I can take the width maybe a bit up and maybe also the slope. And now we can use it just as a very unique filter. But another interesting thing we can do, we can modulate and control the levels of each of the bands separately. We have here the level inputs, 1 input for each of the bands. So we can use, for example, an LFO. I have here four LFOs from Bog Audio. And I also have a macro controller, the macro from Stürmelder, so I can have a look on the frequency control. At the frequency control, I can change the frequency of all of them together with this macro controller. So now let's send those LFOs to the level inputs. I will just do this randomly, just send it, and already you can hear, maybe I will take the levels down first of all, and already you can hear that we have some modulation going on. Maybe I will take also the frequency a bit down, and I will just connect them randomly to each of the bands, just like this, and they will control the levels of those bands. One is missing from here. Right, and now again I can control the frequency of all of those LFOs together with this control here. Audio rate works also nicely. Right, so it creates together with the filter can create an interesting effect. Maybe I can add, you know what, another LFO, why not, to control this filter. Maybe slower. So So there is also movement here. Maybe now we can mix the original signal from the delay, so we have parallel processing. I will just send it from the delay into the mixer. So now we have also the original signal and the extra layer from Spectra. Let's add a bass to this. I have here the interzone from Valley being sequenced again from the Orca's Heart sequencer, and I'm sending also the high frequencies into a delay. A fun thing to try with Spectra is feedback loops. So here I have marbles, and we will come back to this voice later on, but for now its jitter function is all the way up, so it outputs more or less random triggers. I'm sending this, as you can see, from the main trigger output to the VCV mixer, and this we will send to the odd input of Spectra. This input is normaled to the even input, to this here. So basically the signal will go or will be sent to all bands. And let's send Spectra from the both output to the main mixer. So what we get is basically those triggers, but I'm going to send Spectra back to the VCV mixer. For this, let's lower the level of the second channel for now, and I will send Spectra again from the both output. It will go back into the mixer, so we get this feedback loop. Spectra is going to the mixer is going to Spectra, Spectra is going back to the mixer, back to Spectra, back to the mixer, back to Spectra. So we have this nice feedback loop. Now let's start raising the level slowly, and I already recommend lower the levels of your speakers or headphones, and we will raise the level just before it starts to self-oscillate. Somewhere here. So we get a sort of a pink filter sound, and we can use the master filter to shape the sound even more. So let's take the slope and width down. And let's modulate this with walk. I have here walk, which is a smooth random signal. So this will modulate the filter. We can also turn off individual bands we don't want. So in this case, I will turn off the 100 Hz band and the 150 Hz just by clicking this here. So we get this interesting effect. And of course, we can place more modules in this feedback loop, feedback chain. So let's take again the level down, and I will send Spectra, before it goes to the mixer, I will send it first to the VCV delay, which I have here, and then back to the mixer. I have the mix on the delay all the way down, and the feedback, the mix all the way up, and the feedback all the way down, sorry. And I have another walk module. You can see the random signal here. I have it modulating the delay time of this delay. So let's now bring the level back again, just before it self-oscillates. But now we have the delay in the feedback chain. Very cool. We can change the levels of the odd and even bands a bit. Maybe take the odds a bit down, the evens a bit up. Oh yeah. Okay, now let's bring back this voice we had with marbles. So again, I'm using the triggers and the pitch for marbles to sequence two FM operators, which are going through some delay. And I have here another voice with another spectra. So here I'm using noise. I have white noise and gray noise going to the odd and even inputs of spectra. And I'm sort of vocoding this noise with the voices of the FM operator. So I'm sending the signal, a copy of the signal from the delay to UMix to mix those signals. And this is going to the auxiliary input. So again, it's sort of vocoding this noise. Now it's going through some delay, and I have 8 bands off. The lower bands and the higher bands are on, and I'm also modulating the levels with the 8FO, something like this. So there's also movement here. So let's unmute this. Again, sort of vocoding the noise. An interesting feature of Spectra is the fact that we get individual outputs for each of the bands, so we can use and process different bands and add layers and complexity to a sound. So here I have again drums. I have again the gate sequencer sequencing tremor 2, which is a bass drum and a snare in this case, and hi-hats from Hora. And I also have here a plucky sequence. I have the stochastic sequencer sequencing the percussive vibration. Now I'm mixing those voices, so I'm mixing tremor 2 and the hi-hats and the percussive vibration with the VCV mixer. And this is going to Spectra, so we get all 3-4 voices going to Spectra, and we can now start processing the different bands. So for example, I can use bands 10 and 11 from the outputs and send them to a delay. So only those two bands, only what's going on in those two frequencies, which is 1.6K and 2K, will go to a delay. I have here Chronoglobe 2. So again, 10 and 11. So this can add nice ear candy. We can use, for example, bands 15 and 16, so the higher frequencies, 8K and 10K. To a reverb, for example, here I have plateau. Again, to add another layer to the sound. Of course, you can use other processing like distortions and overdrives. And here I have also another feedback loop. So if I use, for example, band 13, which is 3.5K, so everything what is being mixed, the drums and the percussive vibration, all of those frequencies, all of those signals are going into Spectra. And I'm going to use everything that's happening around 3.5K. So this will go to the VCV mixer. And this mixer is going to the delay from VCV and back to the mixer and back to the delay and back to the mixer. So we get again a feedback loop. So we will get something like this. And this is only what's going on channel on band 13. So there are many possibilities with this. Let's add a bass. I have here two Blick oscillators from Volt. Again, I'm mixing them with the VCV mixer. I have Oct adding some movement to the oscillators. This is going through a filter and the VCA, and I'm sidechaining this bass voice in this case with the kick drum. And the sequence itself is coming from two ref tone modules from Borg Audio. One is set to A, one is set to G, and I'm using a sequential switch basically to switch between those pitches. So just like we have individual band outputs, we also have individual envelope follower outputs we can use to control different aspects of our patch. So here I have a sort of a Krell/generative envelope. You can see it here. I have here the AD envelope from Nischi and it's looping, and I'm using the end of cycle to trigger sample and hold, which is modulating the attack and decay times of the envelope. So we get a sort of a Krell style envelope. With each cycle it's changing its length or time. I'm also using this sample and hold to generate pitch information, which I'm quantizing to a scale, and this is sequencing saws from Squinky Labs. And I'm also using the envelope, which you can see again here on the scope, to open the VCA for saws. And this is going through Spectra, and I'm modulating the main filter of Spectra with smooth random voltage. So let's unmute this. So this is this sort of generative voice. And now you can see that we have, if I zoom in a bit, we have individual envelope outputs, envelope follower outputs for each of the bands that will output the amplitude envelope of the respective band. So if I send one to the scope, let's send 7. Here I have the scope. Have a look here. You can see that the more band 7 is, or the level of band 7 is going up, the more signal we get. Again, it will follow the amplitude envelope of this band and will output the respective signal. Now I often use offset, the offset module with from Borg Audio with such a signal to amplify it. So if I send it first to the offset module from Borg Audio, I can now amplify this signal, I can invert this signal, I can offset it even if I want. We can also change the roughness of this signal with the envelope decay settings on Spectra. So for example, if I take the decay up, you will see that it will move slower. It will not be so jumpy and peaky. You can see it's quite smooth, but if I take it all the way down, we will get something a bit more rough and edgy. So let's bring this back. So what we can do with this, here I have an FM operator. It's being sequenced by the modulo sequencer, and it's also going through a VCA to a delay. And we will use one of those bands to open this VCA. So first of all, let's send it again through offset. I will use maybe band 6. This will go through the offset. Already you can see it in action, and I'm amplifying the signal a bit. So the more levels we have on band 6, which is 630 Hz, the more it will open this VCA and will let the FM operator go to the delay. Another thing we can do with the envelope outputs, we can mix them and use them as pitch information as a sequence. So here I have the VCV mixer again. Let's use bands 4, 5, and let's say 8. And now I'm sending this mix signal into a sample and hold. So I will get a new note only with the clock. I'm using the clock to trigger this sample and hold. So we get a sort of a sequence out of those envelopes. This is going to a quantizer again because I want to stay in a certain scale. And it's triggering or sequencing the percussive vibration going through some delay. So if I start taking the level up, you can hear this sequence. And again, the more levels we get on those bands, the more voltage we get in the mixer. And this is sequencing the percussive vibration, so we can use them to generate pitch information. Now we can also use those envelopes for ducking, for side chaining. So here I have the wave oscillator again from Blamsoft. It has some modulation, you can see the movement here. And I can use one of those bands to duck this voice. So let's do this. Let's use band 9. And again, this will go to the offset module. You can see the signal here on the scope. And now what we have to do is, first of all, we have to invert the signal. I don't want this envelope to amplify the wave oscillator. I want it to duck it, to side chain it. So I'm going to have to invert this signal. So I will take the scale all the way left. So it's inverting it, amplifying it, and inverting it. And because I'm using a VCA, and this VCA will work from 0 volts up, I have to push this signal to start from 0 and go up, and this I can do with the offset control. So now you can hear this voice. And most of the time it will be up, so we will hear it. But sometimes, as you can see here, because the level of this band goes up, the level of the wave oscillator will go down. We are ducking, we are side chaining this oscillator with this envelope of this specific band. Okay, now let's turn this patch into some sort of a minimal techno patch. I have here Platts as our kick drum, and the hi-hats from Hora is the hi-hat. And I have here Blick from Volt as our bass, and I'm side-chaining it with the kick drum. And I have a sort of a clicky sound here, so I'm using the end of cycle of the envelope as a sound, as a voice, to trigger this spank envelope from Volt. And I'm using the noise and metal outputs from the hi-hat, so we get a sort of this clicky sound going through some delay, just to add some texture to everything. Very nice, and that was it. As you can see, Spectra is a whole universe by itself. I hope that you will go explore and experiment with it. Thank you for watching, and cheers.